All right, welcome back to another episode of the Podium Pusher podcast. I hope you guys are excited to listen because we're excited to talk about what was possibly and probably the greatest Grand Prix of the season. I loved getting to watch the Canadian Grand Prix, have probably watched the highlights to that race 4 or 5 times since it happened. I enjoyed it that much. Brandon, how are you feeling on this lovely Monday afternoon?
I'm feeling great. It was just a fantastic race. We're 24 hours removed from it now, and it's just great. It was an awesome race, best race of the year so far. Who knows if we'll top it? I hope we do, because that would be amazing. But it was a great race, and I'm excited to talk about it.
We're on a 4 race streak of absolute bangers, and I'm going to include Monaco, and I don't care what anybody says because that was a great weekend and Charles Leclerc won it. So it's getting included in the banger streak. So hopefully things keep on looking up for Formula One. Classic Formula One, it's right at the end of the regulations, but we can at least have hope that there's one more year after this. But before we even talk about the race, let's just quickly go over what happened on the Saturday for this Grand Prix. We've said all along Monaco qualifying is the best qualifying of the year. Canada took that personally and provided us probably the best qualifying of the year. You had Sergio Perez out in Q1, both Ferraris out in Q2, the same time said between Max Verstappen and George Russell, Daniel Ricciardo P5. What a qualifying. What are your quick thoughts on what happened on Saturday?
Yeah, it was just a fantastic qualifying. I mean, um, I don't want to say that Sergio Perez out in Q1 was a shock exit, but it was an exit nonetheless that maybe we weren't expecting or that shouldn't have happened. But yeah, that was really interesting. It just seemed like he didn't really have the pace in the best car on the grid, which is super interesting. I guess, he has absolutely nothing to lose now that his future is signed away with Red Bull. So yeah. But yeah, it was great to see kind of things get mixed up a little bit in qualifying, and then both Ferraris out in Q2. That was a shock. I mean, I don't really know why that happened. I think maybe they just got the setup wrong, but I don't know. It was a great qualifying, and then to have the P1 and P2 the exact same time, and George Russell gets pole because he did it first. I mean, that's just insane.
What an absolutely incredible qualifying session. The Ferraris out in Q2 was definitely the bigger shock of it. I was shopping for groceries and had qualifying on my phone propped up against the eggs in my cart and saw Sergio Perez like P14, and I was like, he's about to get knocked out. And it happened. So I wasn't super surprised by that. But yeah, what a qualifying session overall. Changeable conditions once again. You had teams not knowing in Q2 when the rain was going to come. That played a part in Ferrari being knocked out as they used their fresh tires at the beginning of the session instead of the end, thinking that rain was going to come, and rain ended up not coming, which was unfortunate for them for sure. But Haas did the same thing with Kevin Magnussen, and for them to get knocked out like that is, the most Ferrari thing that you could imagine. And then, yeah, that time for pole, just incredible. And also very happy that it was 3 zeros, that the time lined up to where it was 3 zeros and there was no time between them. I enjoyed that quite a bit. But yeah, qualifying session of the year and race of the year. What a weekend from Canada.
It truly was. And I mean, I feel like Canada is a very simple track. I mean, there's only 14 turns on the track, but it always provides great action, great racing. And it's just a fun track to watch racing at.
I think it's going to be even better with the new regulations. The car's getting smaller. So I'm glad that Canada is locked in for a couple more years. And, it's just a quick flight away for us. Maybe we'll find ourselves in Montreal someday. I certainly wouldn't be too upset about that. But let's jump right into the race and what we thought about it. What was your one-sentence rundown of the Canadian Grand Prix?
So my one sentence rundown might be, I don't know, a little controversial, I guess. But my one sentence rundown is the championship is on for sure. And I'm going to say this for a couple reasons. Number one, Sergio Perez continuing not to perform. If that continues to happen, obviously neither Ferrari scored points. But if Sergio Perez continues to not perform and Max Verstappen can not win races, then I think absolutely the constructors championship is 100% on. And then if Ferrari can get their stuff together and just score any amount of points, they'll stay in it, I think. But, Max, towards the end of the race, last, 11 laps after that safety car, he pulled a gap a little bit, but not as much as, if you're Max Verstappen and Red Bull, you would have hoped. He won by like 3.8 seconds, which is a decent margin, but, I think it just shows that the cars are still converging, but Red Bull's definitely still up there, and I think the championship battle is definitely on. We're only a third of the way through the season. We have 15 races left this year. We're going to Spain next, which is a very different track. We've got a triple header. I believe it's Spain, and then I can't remember the other two races after that, but two other races in Europe, I think, and so there's a lot of points up for grabs there.
I agree with you that the championship is for sure still on. My one sentence write down was almost don't count McLaren out. Obviously, we're saying Ferrari not scoring points this weekend saved Red Bull a little bit in the constructor standings, but McLaren still scored more points than Red Bull did this weekend, and I think that McLaren probably was the best car on track. I think the timing of the safety car probably kept Lando Norris from winning that race. If he didn't catch the safety car where he did, he would have come out in front of Max Verstappen, and I don't think that Red Bull had the pace difference this weekend for him to make that move. I think the McLaren probably was the strongest car on track, and so Lando Norris getting a P2, continuing to cement himself in the Drivers' Championship fight, especially with Charles not scoring any points this weekend. If Lando had won, he would have been the driver who's second in the driver's standings instead of Charles. Instead, he's a really close P3, and so I think with Ferrari not scoring points this weekend, with McLaren bringing home a good haul of points, and I think them probably being between the first and second car, I do think they have a stronger package than Ferrari. Obviously, we saw Mercedes come out of nowhere this weekend and have a really strong weekend. I don't think there's enough time for them to be back in the constructors fight based on how they started the season and how big that gap is, but it's at least something to watch with them taking points off of teams. And if you think you're going to have Sergio Perez struggle or these teams continue to fluctuate, if you have McLaren, having that opportunity to score a lot of points, and you have Ferraris getting caught behind the Mercedes now and scoring a P7 instead of a P5 on a bad weekend, then you could see those gaps at the top of the standings fluctuate even more. And so, yeah, championship 100% back on, 110% on in the constructors, I think. So, yeah, we've got an exciting rest of the season to look forward to.
Yeah, it's going to be great. And with Spain coming up, Spain's a very different track than Montreal, and there's a lot of slow corners, and the Ferrari was really, really good in Monaco. Also has a lot of slow corners, not a lot of overtaking, kind of relatively similar to Spain. So could we see Ferrari do really well in Spain? I don't know. We'll see, but something to watch out for.
We've said this about what seems like every single race the past couple of weeks, but I truly do think Spain is going to be a very telling race and a very important race. It used to be where testing happened because, one, it's centrally located in Europe, but two, because pretty much every sector of that track has different attributes. First sector has that high-speed corner, second sector has some medium-speed corners, then the third sector has some slower-speed corners, especially when it used to have that awful chicane that is now gone, praise the Lord. But yeah, I think Spain is going to be really important, and I think truthfully we're going to see McLaren come out on top in Spain. I think it's going to suit their car well. I think we've seen them have the most balanced pace across a lot of different weekends. Even since their upgrades at the middle of the season last year, there were a lot of tracks where people said, oh, this isn't going to suit McLaren's strength, and then they would still come out and qualify P3 and P4, and Lando would finish P2. And so I think that McLaren is going to be consistent along a lot of different kind of tracks. And so I don't want to get too far ahead into predicting Spain and predicting championships and all that, but don't count McLaren out. That's all I'm saying.
Yeah, I think they're still in it for sure.
My one sentence rundown is the cars may be closer, but Max is still on top. I don't know if you can say for sure that Red Bull had the fastest car this weekend. Obviously, Sergio Perez isn't the best benchmark on if the car is fastest or not based on his current form, but you think he somehow was in what felt like P15 all race long, and like people were retiring and he was still P15, and it rained and people pit and he was still P15, and I was like, what is happening? He had that damage for a little bit, and then they replaced his front wing and he was still P15, and so he couldn't make any progress through the field. Max was complaining about the car feeling really stiff over all the curbs. So I don't know if Red Bull had the best package this weekend, but Max Verstappen showed that he is clearly still the best driver on the grid. And for him to bring home that win, I don't know if Red Bull can count on him to bring home a Constructors' Championship all on his own. But if the cars are going to be this exact pecking order for the rest of the year, I still think Max Verstappen has to be the favorite to bring home the championship, just because of his consistency and his ability to wring every last millisecond of pace out of that car. Even though I bet he wished he had one more millisecond on Saturday, but that's all right.
That's true, yeah. I think, even to start the race, I know the conditions were like mixed conditions, and you had some rainfall at some point, but the Mercedes was beating Max, for 20 plus laps. The Red Bull wasn't able to make the gap up, and that was George Russell and the Mercedes that is so far this season someone that Max has beaten easily, not even been competing with. So it was interesting to see that the Red Bull could close the gap there.
Yeah, you saw different times throughout the race where the Mercedes was faster than the Red Bull, and there was a time when the McLaren was faster than the Red Bull. You saw George Russell make mistakes, and Oscar Piastri make a mistake, and Lando Norris get unlucky with the safety car, and you just saw Max make no mistakes. He aced both safety car restarts. He drove around the curves when the car was feeling stiff, and so just even when he maybe didn't have the fastest car this weekend, I think Max Verstappen just drove the perfect race and came away with a very deserving victory.
I've always thought this about Max Verstappen, but there is no driver better at safety car restarts than Max Verstappen. Every single time he aces it, always catches everybody else, sleeping a little bit. And yeah, I think there's nobody better. It's really crazy to watch him just ace safety car restart after safety car restart.
Even with that second one, everyone knew when he was going to go, and he still knew where the grip was going to be in changeable conditions and got out in front and didn't look back. So great weekend for Max Verstappen. To me, he is still the championship favorite. Let's talk about a team who maybe we thought was going to be getting back into that championship battle and be championship favorites. Ferrari, what a poor weekend from them. I was truly on the high of Monaco, of Charles Leclerc winning, and said Ferrari is so back. And they've had a great season. They've been very consistent. They haven't made any stupid strategy errors that we've come to expect from Ferrari. And then they just had all of their issues in one weekend. They had no pace. They got knocked out in Q2. They had poor strategy decisions on Saturday and Sunday. They had engine issues. Carlos Sainz binned it. Just a terrible weekend from Ferrari. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, it really seemed like everything that could go wrong for Ferrari did go wrong at some point or another during the weekend. So I think there was some bad luck involved there, but also, they did have limited running time in dry conditions. So when the conditions were leaning towards kind of drier during qualifying, I think maybe they got the setup wrong in the car. We kind of just talked about it a couple minutes ago, but Montreal is very different than Monaco, and if the car is going to be super strong in Monaco, Montreal is probably the track that it wouldn't be super strong at. So not all that surprising, I guess, to see them maybe not qualify as well, but for them not to have, any race pace at all, really. And that was kind of the biggest surprise for me. But I'm thinking it's more of they got the setup wrong situation as opposed to them having a bad car or anything like that. So.
For sure. It was definitely some strategy issues, some bad luck, and probably a poor setup. Like you said, there wasn't a lot of dry running in practice, and even when there was going to be, Guan Yu Zhou made sure that there was a red flag to take away about 15 more minutes of that. So yeah, just not a great weekend from Ferrari. There will be weekends that, you just are off the pace and mess up the strategy a little bit, and you just expect them to still, bring home like a P6 and a P7. And so for them to not score any points and to have a double DNF is not great, but I still wouldn't count him out of either championship. It's a long season. Charles is still P2. Ferrari's still P2 in the constructors. And so I think it's just one bad weekend. There's no need to panic. I know some people are having PTSD flashbacks to 2018 and 2019 and Ferrari throwing away these championships with great cars, but there's no reason to panic yet. It's going to be okay. And, I think Ferrari are going to be just fine.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah. Well, we'll see what Spain and the rest of the season brings.
Here's a driver I would panic about. Sergio Perez just got himself a nice 2-year contract extension. We found out this weekend where Christian Horner let slip, or maybe said it intentionally to the media, that it's actually more of a 1+1. We knew that there had to be performance clauses in there somehow. There's no way that Red Bull would give Sergio Perez that extension. Yes, he brings in a lot of sponsorship money, but what does it matter if he's been in the car and not scoring points and gonna make him lose the Constructors' Championship? What the heck is going on with Sergio Perez right now?
I have no clue. It's kind of painful to watch. I mean, Max is up there qualifying, technically kind of on pole, not really, but and then Sergio's out P16. I mean, it just doesn't make any sense. And then, like you said earlier, he was making zero progress in the race. I guarantee you, if the roles were flipped and Max Verstappen was P16 and Sergio started P2, I mean, you'd see maybe Sergio fall back a couple places, and you'd see Max Verstappen charge to the field and get a podium finish. And it just doesn't make any sense to me. And I don't know if Sergio is driving last year's car or what the situation is, but it really seems like he's kind of lost his mojo. And he had a solid start to the season, and again, about this time of year, end of April, May, and June, we see Sergio kind of fall apart, and it's almost as certain as having to pay your taxes and that kind of thing is seeing Sergio fall off in the middle of the season. But I have no explanation for it, and I don't know what's going on there on his side of the garage.
It truly is hard to watch. It's just, you're right. We knew it was going to happen at some point. We were hesitant to put him in our predictions all year long. And, we've seen him have good starts to the year before, but even this year, it wasn't as good of a start to a year as he's had in years past. He never really challenged for any wins. We saw him have that poor race at Australia pretty early in the season when Max had that DNF. Sergio was nowhere in that race. And so I was shocked when Red Bull gave him that 2-year extension when it was announced. You and I texted about it as soon as it happened, and we were both pretty surprised by it. And now that this weekend happened and last weekend happened and even the weekend before it happened, I have no confidence in that signing at all. And I think Red Bull are almost signing away the Constructors' Championship. And, that's crazy to say because they've been the dominant car over the past couple of seasons, and they started this year off so strong, but I've watched that gap fall. I've seen the other teams catch up. I've seen the other driver lineups have 2 drivers there to fight and score points and to do things with the strategy. And just with Sergio Perez in his current form, there's nothing to make me believe he's going to turn it around anytime soon. And there's nothing to make me believe that Red Bull can comfortably win the Constructors' Championship this year.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting to watch coming down to the end of the season. But like you said, it just seems like Red Bull has one dog in the fight instead of 2. And they should have 2 up there. And I don't know why they didn't extend an offer to Carlos Sainz. I mean, maybe they did, and Carlos was like, "No thanks." But I don't know why Carlos is not. Yeah, probably not. But I don't understand the signing there. And I mean, I guess contracts these days don't necessarily mean a lot, but I mean, if Sergio continues to Bennett and P16, for races away, I mean, maybe we could see a replacement happen sooner than his contract is over. But I mean, it's really confusing for me to see this after I know he did a lot for them in 2021, but other than that.
And I think you bring up a good point there. For him to be running P16 by itself is not great. But for him to bin it for no reason, just a simple mistake on his own, was trying to pass an Alpine and put a tire in the wet stuff and spun off. In a budget cap era, that hurts the team more than financially. It's going to hurt the team in development, in the car that they have at the end of the year, and the resources that they're able to use for upgrades. And so, not only is he having an impact points-wise on the Constructors' Championship, but he could be having an impact on round 22 because they weren't able to bring in that front wing upgrade that they needed to have success at that race. And so he could be hurting the team, by putting it in the wall every weekend. I know Monaco wasn't fully his fault, but he's got to take some of the blame for qualifying that low and whatnot. And so he's racking up that repair bill, and that could be quite harmful to the team as well.
Absolutely. I mean, and that's not a team that's necessarily used to spending that kind of money on repairs. Whereas, maybe some other teams that crash more frequently, looking at maybe Williams, maybe they budget a little bit more for repair bills. Whereas Red Bull, I can't remember the last time Max had a massive crash. So they're not used to spending that money. So maybe they're not budgeting as much of it for that. But
I think that's a great segue to talk about Williams really quick. Very unfortunate for them to have both of their drivers crash out. Obviously, that one's on Logan Sargeant for sure. Alex Albon probably a little bit more unlucky to have Carlos Sainz spin and back into him. So very unfortunate. We know they've had a high repair bill so far this year, and it has hindered them in a lot of ways. So unfortunate to see that. But I wanted to have faith in Logan Sargeant after Saturday. He qualified P13, great performance, was so close into getting into Q3. At one point, he was like P5. I was like, what the heck is going on? Let's go Logan. And then just had an awful race. He went off in like lap 12 and was like 40 seconds behind the pack, and then proceeded to bin it and cause a safety car, which I think should have been a red flag. It was kind of crazy to see that big of a recovery vehicle on the track underneath that bridge, but that's a conversation for a different time. But Williams, they're ninth in the constructor standings right now. They're behind Alpine, and no one in their right mind truly thinks that Alpine is a better car than that Williams. And so if Williams is going to be serious, if they're going to move up the constructor standings and start developing a better car, should they replace Logan mid-season and not even wait until the end of this year?
I mean, that's a great question, but at this point, I know just got done saying that there's 15 races left in the season, but I mean, we are a third of the way through. How much effort and energy is it going to take a new driver, put them in a car that they haven't raced before, get them up to speed, like in racing in an F1 car? Maybe it's, maybe you don't choose somebody completely new. Maybe you go like Mick Schumacher or somebody who's raced before, so they know what it's like to drive an F1 car, but still you have to get somebody up to speed with the schedule, with the testing, sim work, all that kind of stuff. How much of an impact is that going to have towards the end of the season? Are you going to be able to compete and score points with someone else as opposed to Logan? I don't know. I think if that decision is going to happen, it's going to happen very soon, I would think. But at least maybe they're getting things in order to make the switch around the summer break, I would think. But I don't know. It's a tough question to answer because it's like, that's kind of something we got to do like right now. It's going to make a difference, I think. And I don't know. There's also a lot of other things that Williams has to juggle, like trying to convince Carlos Sainz to race for them next year. So,
well, apparently they've already convinced him of that, and we're going to hear about it very soon when we are in Spain. But that is a discussion for another day as well. Before this weekend, I was very anti-replace Logan Sargeant. Part of that is probably because I am an American Formula One fan and enjoy seeing an American driver. And part of that was also, I think Kimi Antonelli is too young. Give him some more time in F2 to develop. I mean, that's one of the problems we had with Logan Sargeant, was rushing him into F1. He barely had enough super license points, and we're asking for an exception for Kimi Antonelli to get to race. I don't know if that's the path we want to go. After this weekend, it's too much. We've seen Logan Sargeant off the pace, and we've seen him crash if you're going to be off the pace and crash, I'd rather have someone who is going to be pushing the car to the limits and be on the pace and maybe score points and bin it a couple times, a Max Verstappen and a Toro Rosso or something like that. And so, I think there is nothing wrong with putting a young driver in like Kimi Antonelli, who could have more pace than Logan Sargeant. I mean, worst case scenario, you're going to get the same results you have right now, both in the damage cost and in the points scored. Best case scenario, you're getting a young driver in who is going to push Alex Albon, who is going to maybe score the odd point here and there, which is something I don't think Logan Sargeant is doing at all. And so, I think Toto behind the scenes could be saying some things and trying to get Kimi into that seat if he wants to have him at Mercedes next season. I could see there being some influence going on there. Obviously, Williams isn't a junior team, but Mercedes is their engine supplier, and we've seen them have influence over that seat before with George Russell. And so, I think it's possible. We've seen the language shift in James Vowles. You think last year and the beginning of this year, he was fully supportive of Logan and saying he's got the potential, and we're seeing him improve behind the scenes, and we've got his back fully. And then this weekend and the past couple of weekends, we've seen we're looking in different directions. We want to have 2 world-class drivers. That one really showed me that's like, they don't think they have 2 world-class drivers right now. They're trying to look elsewhere. And so, I think I don't want to read too much into that, but I definitely think it's a possibility that Logan Sargeant gets replaced mid-season.
Yeah, I think it's a definite possibility. And yeah, I mean, James Vowles, I think, has been one of the most honest team principals in terms of like speaking to the media. And I mean, he's come out and said multiple times now that Carlos Sainz is their number 1 target for next year, and and they're aggressively pursuing him and that kind of thing. And for him to come out and say, yeah, we don't have 2 world-class drivers right now, and we're looking to get that. Can't imagine that they're thinking about replacing Alex Albon. So, yeah, I think that's very interesting, and to hear James say that is, I think, very telling of what Logan's future is going to be at.
I enjoy James Vowles very much. I believe in him. I believe in his 5-year plan. He's bringing Williams back to the front. Alex Albon and Carlos Sainz going to be one heck of a pair in that team. All right, we got one more driver we got to talk about in this segment. You thought we could move on without talking about it. What a weekend from Daniel Ricciardo, qualifying P5, getting that penalty off the line, which the team says wasn't his fault. There was something wrong with the car when he was trying to find the revs. It moved when it shouldn't have, and that caused him to get that 5-second penalty. Still ends up in P8 across the line, bringing home some good points, beating Yuki Tsunoda. Obviously, Yuki was in front and then made that mistake, so you can't say that Yuki deserved to finish in front of him. He got passed by Ocon, and Daniel made that move pretty quick on Esteban. So it was obvious that Daniel was faster, and Yuki Tsunoda made that mistake under pressure. But great weekend for Daniel Ricciardo. We just saw his teammate get re-signed for the next year. Does Daniel Ricciardo deserve to keep his seat for 2025? And where does this put him in discussion for that Red Bull seat, even though we just saw Sergio Perez get re-signed?
Yeah, it was an awesome weekend for Daniel, and I loved seeing his smile in the media pin. Daniel's always going to do well when he is, happy talking to the media. And you could tell Daniel was just feeling good, so he's going to be on it. And it was kind of unfortunate with that penalty. I mean, the movement prior to the lights going out was so slight. I went back and watched that like 5 times, and it was just, right there. And obviously they have sensors and technology to tell if the car moves or not. So if they hand out a penalty, they're going to be pretty sure about that. But it was so unfortunate that happened. But yeah, it was a solid weekend for Daniel. To qualify P5, that was so incredible to watch. And I really thought he was going to hang on to P4 there for a second, and he very nearly did. To be less than 2/10 off pole is great, and just to hear him just be really confident in himself is really cool. I think Daniel definitely is. I've seen a lot of rumors that he's going to extend for 2025 as well with RB. I think he definitely deserves that opportunity. And, if he continues to put together performances like this, where he's just plain beating Sergio Perez, there might be consideration for him to take over the Red Bull seat. So that'll be interesting to see as this season progresses and next season progresses as well.
It was very interesting to see that this was the first weekend after Sergio Perez re-signed that contract, and you would say that he got outperformed by both RB drivers. And so then, we saw Yuki Tsunoda in front, and I was ready for this to be another thing in his resume for, being, hey, it should have been him in that seat. And then for him to bin it 4 laps from the end and throw that away was not great. And so you would argue that Daniel Ricciardo had the best weekend of, the 3 of those drivers going for that seat. I don't necessarily see a downside to re-signing him for 2025. I know everyone's saying, get Liam Lawson in that seat. You're going to lose Liam Lawson. Where is Liam Lawson going to go? He's not going to get a seat at another team. If there was strong rumors of him going to Williams or going to Haas or something like that, then I would be more concerned. But he has been nowhere in those conversations, and I don't think he's factoring into those conversations with any teams, especially with the more experienced drivers like the Valtteri Bottas and the Esteban Ocon now still available in the driver market, even Carlos Sainz still, even though we think he's going to go to Williams. And so, Lawson might be stuck waiting for another year. And if he doesn't have any other options, then, he'll probably stay in the Red Bull family just because that's still the closest thing to getting him to a seat. And so, I've seen a lot of rumors as well that Daniel's still going to say. Even Helmut Marko has said that Daniel is on a multi-term deal with Red Bull. And so, I think he'll probably end up staying with RB for 2025.
Yeah, I agree. And we'll see if that translates over to the actual Red Bull seat. But I mean, if Sergio keeps doing this, I see no loss for Red Bull to drop Sergio and put Daniel in the seat. I mean, there's literally no reason not to.
All right, who is your podium pusher of the weekend this time out in Montreal?
I'm going to go with Lando Norris. We talked about the McLaren and Lando a little bit already. Got some unfortunate luck with the safety car, and then he was so close to coming out in front of Max after he pitted onto the slick tires. Lando just drove a solid race, and had he qualified a little bit better, he probably could have won. Had that safety car not come out when it did, probably could have won. If he had pitted for slicks 1 lap earlier, he probably could have won. But it's okay. Lando got another podium, another P2 finish, continued to rack up the points for McLaren, for himself in the driver's standings. He's very close to P2 in the driver's standings. I think he's definitely in that championship. McLaren, as we've already talked about, definitely in the constructors fight. So it was a solid weekend from Lando, and it was great to see him continue to do well. And it was just an awesome drive from him.
Yeah, great weekend from Lando overall. He was only 0.021 seconds away from pole position, and for that to put him third is a little unlucky. But there's definitely a lot of things that could have gone differently for him to maybe win that race. Would have been interesting to see if he pitted for slicks 1 lap earlier. Obviously, him doing that overcut is what gave him the chance to be in front of Max. He was really quick in that crossover period between inters to dries. Both times we saw that. And so he gained time and then gained time. But on that last lap, he lost a little bit of time to Max Verstappen. He was definitely deep into that crossover period. I still think he probably would have ended up behind just because of that, how wet that pit exit was. And, he came out in front of Max, but still ended up behind him because of how wet that pit exit was. But something interesting to think about. Probably still would have come home second, but solid weekend from him for sure. My podium pusher of the weekend is George Russell. Obviously, through the practices, Lewis Hamilton looked like the quicker Mercedes, and we're saying, all right, Mercedes have some pace, and Lewis Hamilton is back on form. And then George Russell came and smacked him in qualifying for him to get pole and for Lewis to qualify P7. That's quite a big gap there. And then for him to re-overtake Lewis at the end. I've seen a lot of people say that George could have won this race. I don't think so. I think that Mercedes was clearly a fast car, but I think they were probably the 3rd quickest car, maybe the 2.5. They were behind Lando, but in front of Oscar. Obviously, that's how they finished. But that was probably just because of them pitting late for fresher tires on that last safety car. But I think even with the mistakes that he made, and he made a couple this weekend during the race for sure. George Russell made some mistakes. But I think P3 was probably the best that George could have done with the pace of that Mercedes and the two drivers that finished in front of him. So to get a pole, come home in front of Lewis on the Saturday and the Sunday, and to bring home Mercedes' first podium of the year, I think it's a great weekend from George Russell.
Yeah, I agree. And we talked about last week Mercedes having a strong track record at Canada, and I think George has had a great season so far. He's had the better season out of the two Mercedes drivers, and it was a strong performance from him, and a great thing for him to earn another pole position.
Yeah, here's what I will say. I've seen a lot of people online saying that Mercedes are sabotaging Lewis Hamilton. No, they're not. That makes no sense. He's one of the greatest drivers of all time, won them so many championships. He's still there for the rest of the year. They want to maximize the points. They're not going to throw away one car in the weekend because the driver's leaving at the end of the season. He didn't have any softs left at the end of the race. That's why he went on the hard tires at the end, guys. It's okay. Mercedes aren't sabotaging Lewis Hamilton. Just had to get that off my chest because I've read so many comments about that online. And I'm like, there is no shot that Mercedes said, let's throw away the chance at a double podium just to mess with Lewis because he's leaving. Formula One teams don't work like that. That's not what happened at all.
Yeah, definitely not. And I mean, he brought them 8 constructors championships and 6 drivers world championships. I mean, there's no way that Mercedes would think like that. Mercedes is not a petty 13-year-old girl. They're a Formula One team. So,
who is your back marker of the weekend?
My back marker of the weekend, we've already talked about him, but it's got to be Sergio. I don't know what he's doing. He's not driving very well, and he seems to be just making excuses for it, or I don't know, what have you. He just seems to kind of try to brush it off and say we'll get him next weekend. Well, Sergio's running out of weekends to keep getting him. I think that he needs to turn it around quickly, or the rumors will start swirling. So that's my back marker of the weekend.
Not a great race from Sergio. The rumors never stopped swirling. He signed the new contract, and immediately everyone was like, there's got to be a way for them to end that early. And then he had this race weekend, and everyone's like, there's definitely a way for them to end this early. So, yeah, not a great weekend from Sergio Perez. And I think it's another poor instance for him of it's not going to help his confidence. And we think a lot of this is because of his confidence in driving behind the car. I think we've seen that over the last couple of years, just a lack of confidence from Sergio, and what's being said in the media and what is happening on track from him is not going to do anything great for his confidence for sure. My back marker of the weekend, I went with Haas. Obviously, I could have gone with Ferrari because they probably had the worst weekend of any team. But how on earth did Haas not score any points in this race? They made a great strategy call to start on the wets and made up so much time. And then the crossover period came, and they probably waited a lap or two too long with Kevin, and then didn't have the tires ready, and then just stuck Nico Hülkenberg out there and did who knows what with his strategy. And then you had like 7 cars who were in front of them retire, and they still finished like out of the points. So Haas missed opportunity this weekend. Obviously didn't qualify great, messed up their strategy in Q2 with Kevin. Nico P19 is something that we didn't expect from him, but I predicted him as back marker of the weekend. So, but what can I say? Yeah, they should have scored points this weekend with the strategy they had at the beginning and the amount of cars that retired from in front of them. But somehow they managed to not score a single point.
It's crazy. I mean, Kevin was running in P4 at one time. P4. Had they pitted him a lap or two earlier and had the tires ready, like you would expect them to do in this situation, Kevin probably would have definitely scored points. And if the rain had continued to fall, Kevin definitely would have taken the lead of the race for sure. But I mean, that's a little more out of their control. But, for things that are in their control, it was a wild thing to watch them running in P4, and then Kevin comes out in like P12, and then continues to just fall back, and then Nico stays out there for like 9 more laps or whatever, and I don't know, destroys his extreme wet tires, and everybody else is basically going to slicks when he's going to inters or not really, but that's what it felt like.
It was not a great handling of that for sure. If they hadn't messed up Kevin's pit stop, I think he would have come out in between P8 and P10. And with the chaos that happened, that's probably where he would have finished. And so, yeah, I think, it wasn't a guarantee. Obviously, we can sit here and say if they did this, if they did that, if the rain had come 5 minutes longer, but there was definitely a chance for points. And I think it was a good chance for points. And I think we're seeing that time of the season where the other teams develop better than Haas, and Haas are slipping back a little bit from where they started this year. And so opportunities for points are going to be fewer and far between. And so I think they threw it away this weekend for sure.
Yeah. Sad day for Haas and their climb up the ladder.
Yep. Just another fall down the ladder this weekend, but that's all right. What were the bold predictions you made for this race weekend, and how did they turn out?
So my predictions for this weekend, we had another okay, weekend with predictions. First one, not so good. I said both Alpines to finish P14 or lower. Unfortunately, that did not happen. I believe they actually both scored points. It was like a P9 and P10 situation, I believe, for them. So that was unfortunate that they did so well. Unfortunate for me, fortunate for them, I suppose. But yeah, and also you had 5 cars retire, so for them both to finish P14 or lower and finish the race, kind of very, very slim chances of that happening, I guess, statistically when you're looking at it. So didn't get that one. But the next one, I did get the driver not in the top 3 teams to score the fastest lap, and Lewis Hamilton scored the fastest lap. And he is probably in the 4th best car, which very close. But yeah, we got that, and it was kind of nerve-wracking watching the fastest lap switch like 100 times during the race, and thinking, okay, sweet, got it in the bag. Nope, there it goes. Okay, we're good. But came out on top, so that was good.
Yeah, glad you got that one at the end. You could make the argument that Mercedes had the 3rd quickest car this weekend, but I'm not going to make that argument. They're 4th in the constructor standings. When we made the predictions, the top 3 teams were defined as Red Bull, McLaren, and Ferrari, and you predicted specifically that a Mercedes would get the fastest lap when I questioned you about it. So you for sure deserve the point on that one. Here's another thing that happened. So much happened in this race. We're just now getting to talk about this. Alpine had their driver swap drama at the end of the race. Obviously, Daniel Ricciardo is in front of both Alpines. Yuki Tsunoda goes off, and then they let Pierre Gasly in front of Esteban Ocon to chase down Daniel Ricciardo, who had built almost a 3-second gap in like 2 laps because that Alpine is slow as heck. So there's no shot Pierre Gasly was going to get him. Ocon thought they were going to swap back at the end. They did not swap in the end at all. And they flat out told them, they're like, yeah, we're not swapping back. And so I don't know if that was Alpine being like, you're gone, buddy. No points for you. You still got a point. But yeah, so that was crazy. Esteban was upset. Clearly, those 2 drivers still dislike each other very, very much. But, Alpine did score some points this weekend, but it came at great cost of driver relationship.
It sure did. Not that there was much relationship left. And I watched an interview of Pierre, I believe it was still before the race. And I don't know, somebody asked him, like, how has it been with, now that Esteban has, been announced that he's not coming back next year for Alpine, what can you talk about what y'all's relationship has been like? And Pierre was just like, yeah, he like dodged the question with like a 45-second answer that was just words that meant nothing. So that was just great to watch. But yeah, they clearly don't like each other very much, and that didn't help, which I don't know. It was very comical to watch that whole situation play out. It was, I don't know, not great for the team, not great for either driver, but fun to watch.
And they got double points, so I'm sure Alpine isn't all that upset. They do know that Esteban's leaving at the end of the year, so they don't really have to worry about that driver relationship. My bold predictions, we went 2 for 2 this week. Sergio Perez finishes out the top 5 again. Maybe I need to make that prediction bolder from now on because that was a rough weekend from Sergio Perez. Knew I had that one locked in from Saturday. and then said that at least 6 Mercedes-powered cars would make it into Q3, which was correct. Actually had 7 cars make it into Q3, so that one wasn't as bold as I thought it was going to be either. We almost went 8 for 8, but I will take the 7 cars getting in and give me that point. So 2 for 2 from Justin in Montreal.
Yeah, that was great. I really thought the 6 Mercedes-powered cars was a really kind of on the fence prediction. It was a great bold prediction, but I mean, with Ferrari not really being in it, that kind of opened the door. But who could have known that was going to happen? So it was a great prediction. You got it locked down. So
I could have known.
You knew.
I did.
That you. Yeah.
Great home weekend from Lance Stroll. He deserved it. You know, we're used to these races with Fernando performing and Lance Stroll finishing way down the order. But he was with Fernando all weekend. Fernando was the faster Aston Martin, but good weekend from Lance. You got to think if the Ferraris were in it and Daniel had better strategy and no penalty, they probably would have finished in front of Lance Stroll, but that's not what happened, and Lance Stroll brought home great points. We love seeing drivers do well at their home race, even when it's Lance Stroll, so great weekend from him.
Absolutely, yeah. He grew up not too far from the track, so that's really cool that he grew up and was born really close to where they're actually racing, and he got the job done, which was awesome.
All right, this has probably been the longest episode of the Podium Pusher podcast, but it was the best race of the year. We had a lot to talk about. I had fun doing it. Brandon, what are your parting podium thoughts before we leave these lovely people?
Podium thoughts, man. I'm excited for Spain. Canada was awesome. We're back to the early morning or Sunday races for us in Europe. It's going to be great. It'll be a very telling race. I'm excited for Spain. Excited for the rest of the season. Excited to go to Austin in October. That's getting closer too. So good things on the horizon. It was very fun getting to talk about this race, and can't wait to get to talk about the next one too.
I know I'm getting messages from our Airbnb host in Austin, which means we're getting close. But yeah, we have a lot of exciting races coming up before the summer break, and I'm excited to see what the championship standings look like going into the summer break and seeing the form of the teams and drivers when we get back from the summer break. You would expect a lot of silly season moves to be announced over the summer break, and maybe even as soon as Spain if Carlos Sainz has signed a deal. So there's a lot of things going around in Formula One right now. My parting podium thoughts, just a big thank you from me to you guys. Hit over 300 listens on Spotify this week. That is awesome. Very thankful for that. You know, still growing on YouTube, all of our social medias. So big thank you from us to all of you guys. It truly does mean a lot.
Absolutely. We appreciate you guys listening, and just every time we get a new follower, like it's really means a lot to us, and we're just glad that we get to do this. It's a lot of fun.
Well, that is all we've got for this episode of the Podium Pusher podcast. Thank you guys so much for listening. Be sure to like, subscribe, and follow wherever you are listening or watching this podcast. You can find us on YouTube, Instagram, Twitter, TikTok, wherever you're listening to podcasts, probably where you're listening to this right now. And we will see you guys in the next one.
See ya.